You've seen The Green Mile. You might have cried during it. Maybe you even called it one of the greatest movies ever made. But what if I told you you never truly understood it? Beneath the haunting performances and emotional storyline lies a world of secrets that most fans completely missed. Details so subtle, even die-hard Stephen King fans never picked up on them. Hidden meanings, unseen symbolism, real pain the actors brought to the screen, and moments that shattered them behind the scenes. From a cast member's heartbreaking confession to the emotional weight Tom Hanks carried long after the cameras stopped rolling, to the scene that nearly never made it in, this isn't just another film breakdown. This is the untold story of The Green Mile, and once you hear it, you'll never look at the film the same way again. 1. The movie that nearly didn't happen. It's hard to imagine now, but The Green Mile almost never saw the light of day. After the underwhelming box office performance of The Shawshank Redemption, yes, that Shawshank, Hollywood had serious doubts about another long, slow-burning prison drama based on a Stephen King novel. Shawshank may be a classic today, but when it hit theaters in 1994, audiences stayed away. It wasn't until years later, through cable TV and word of mouth, that it found its place among the greatest films ever made. At the time, studios considered it a disappointment, and for Frank Darabont, the man behind both films, that failure left scars. So when Darabont returned to the studio with The Green Mile, another King adaptation set in a prison, and running close to 3 hours, the reaction was anything but enthusiastic. Executives questioned everything, especially whether audiences had the patience to sit through another slow-paced death row story. From a financial standpoint, it was a risk no one wanted to take. Enter Tom Hanks. Fresh off the massive success of Forrest Gump and Saving Private Ryan, Hanks was one of the most bankable stars on the planet. His presence didn't just draw attention, it gave the project credibility. Suddenly, studios were listening. But even with Hanks on board, compromises were demanded. Cut the runtime, speed up the pacing, trim the emotional beats. Darabont refused. He believed the story couldn't be rushed, that the slow unraveling of character and conscience was the entire point. The heartbreak, the moral conflict, the spiritual weight, it all needed time to breathe. And so, he held his ground, risking the entire project to preserve the story's integrity. That gamble paid off, but it didn't just shape the final film, it shaped how the cast and crew approached it. Everyone knew they weren't just making a movie, they were building something rare, a story that dared to take its time, to ask hard questions, and to sit with the answers. And it all started with a script nobody wanted, a director who wouldn't compromise, and an actor who believed in the story enough to fight for it. But what really gave The Green Mile its soul wasn't the script. It wasn't even the cast. It was the place where the story unfolded, a place built from scratch, not just as a set, but as a silent, suffocating character all its own. 2. The prison that became a character. Most movie sets are just that, sets. Painted walls, soundproofed stages, and props designed to fool the camera. But The Green Mile didn't just take place in a prison. It breathed like one. And it was real enough to haunt the people inside it. Unlike The Shawshank Redemption, which was filmed in an actual decommissioned prison, The Green Mile was built entirely from scratch. Director Frank Darabont didn't want to use a real location. He needed full control over every corner, every light fixture, every sound that echoed down the mile. So production designer Terrence Marsh, an Oscar winner, set out to build a death row that felt alive. The result? A terrifyingly immersive space where the green linoleum floors weren't just accurate to 1930s Southern prisons, they became symbolic. That shade of green, the one that gave the film its name, was selected to reflect death. It lined the path to the electric chair. It surrounded every inmate's final days. Even the wiring, door hinges, and overhead lights were built using historical references. Nothing was random. Every detail was chosen to make the actors feel like they had stepped back in time. And it worked. David Morse, who played Brutal Howell, later said that the set didn't feel like a backdrop. It felt like another character. The corridor was designed to grow darker as you moved toward the chair. The light literally faded the closer you got to death. You didn't need sound effects or dramatic music. Just walking that hall gave you chills. Then there was the electric chair itself. Old Sparky. It wasn't just a prop. It was a functioning special effects machine designed by FX coordinator Charles Gibson to simulate real executions. It could emit smoke, shake violently, and even crackle with light during key scenes. The realism was so intense it made the set deeply uncomfortable. Sam Rockwell, who played Wild Bill, recalled how the energy during execution scenes was different from anything else he'd ever filmed. And maybe the most chilling moment didn't even involve cameras. Before filming began, Darabont had the entire cast report to the set in silence. No dialogue, no rehearsals. Each actor was assigned their role and told to just be. The guards stood at their posts. The prisoners sat silently in their cells. And for one afternoon, The Mile wasn't a movie. It was real. That experience wasn't just theatrical. It rewired the cast's understanding of the story. They felt the claustrophobia, the hopelessness, the quiet terror of living in a place where every day could be your last. From that moment on, no one needed to act like they were in prison. They were already there. And yet, it wasn't just the set that made the story hit so hard. It was the people who inhabited it. Because what most fans never realized is how much the cast poured their real lives into these characters. 3. The characters you thought you knew. If The Green Mile felt real to you, it's because the people playing those roles weren't just performing. They were remembering, reliving, channeling something far deeper than what was on the page. Tom Hanks didn't just show up and play Paul Edgecombe. He built him. Quietly, privately, he created an entire backstory never mentioned in the script. In Hanks's mind, Paul was a World War I veteran, a man who had seen real evil, senseless violence, fear, and death. That's why Paul reacts so strongly to Percy's cruelty. It's not just professional disgust, it's personal. It reminds him of the chaos he fought to escape, the war that left invisible scars, that imagined past shaped every look, every line. Paul isn't just a guard. He's a man trying not to break. Then there was Michael Clarke Duncan. Most fans know Duncan as the gentle giant who brought John Coffey to life, but few realize just how deeply he transformed himself for that role. Before The Green Mile, he wasn't a household name. He was a former ditch digger, bouncer, and bodyguard, built like a linebacker, with a filmography filled with nameless muscle roles. Coffey demanded something completely different. To prepare, Duncan studied people who needed care, patients in hospitals, children with emotional trauma. He wanted to understand what it meant to be strong but helpless, wise but wounded. He made a choice. When Coffey is in his cell, he carries himself like a child, slumped, uncertain, vulnerable. But when he heals, when he uses that mysterious power, his body shifts, upright, still, confident. It's so subtle you might not notice, but it's there, every single time. And it wasn't just the leads. Doug Hutchison, who played Percy Wetmore, the sniveling, entitled guard that everyone loves to hate, based the character on someone very real, a childhood bully. That memory, and the emotions tied to it, gave Percy a kind of twisted authenticity that made audiences squirm. He wasn't cartoonishly evil. He was believably cruel. The kind of cruelty that's quietly allowed in institutions. The kind that hides behind a uniform. These weren't random choices. The cast didn't just memorize lines. They lived inside their roles. They imagined what these people carried, what broke them, what kept them going. That's why so many moments in the film feel raw, honest, uncomfortable. Because they were. And those choices didn't stay isolated, they bled into the scenes, into the symbols, into every quiet moment that most viewers never realized meant something far more profound. Because just beneath the surface of The Green Mile, something was hiding. 4. Symbolism most fans never noticed. The Green Mile is one of those rare films that leaves a mark. Even if you can't explain why, you feel it. The sorrow, the beauty, the weight. But what if that feeling isn't just the acting or the story? What if it's something buried deeper, hidden in plain sight? Let's start with the color green. Yes, it's in the title. Yes, the floor is green. But look closer. That exact shade of green shows up every time death is near. The curtains in the execution chamber? Green. The sponge meant to conduct electricity during executions? Also green. Even the eerie reflection in Wild Bill's eyes when he first arrives? Green. It's not an accident. It's a warning. A quiet signal that death is watching. Then there's the healing. Most viewers remember the unforgettable scenes where John Coffey performs what look like miracles, drawing out disease, pain, even death itself. But those moments aren't just about physical healing. They're about spiritual transformation. Every person Coffey touches changes on the inside. Paul doesn't just get rid of his infection. He begins to question his role in carrying out executions. Melinda, the woman Coffey heals from a brain tumor, doesn't just recover. She talks to Coffey like a child, like someone seeing innocence for the first time in years. Coffey doesn't just heal bodies, he heals souls. And then there's the biblical imagery, more than most people realize. When Coffee says, "I'm tired, boss," tired of being on the road, lonely as a sparrow in the rain. It's not just a poetic line. It echoes Psalm chapter 102. I am like a bird alone on the roof, a cry of loneliness, of despair, of a soul burdened by pain no one else can see. The film never shoves the symbolism in your face, but it's there, in every small detail. Like when the guards remove Coffee's chains before the execution, quietly, reverently. It mirrors Christ being taken down from the cross. And when Paul, shaken and confused, asks Coffee what he should do, Coffee answers with a simple, "You be still." It's not just dialogue. It's scripture. It's surrender. A man facing death, comforting the living. These layers of meaning, death, redemption, sacrifice, are woven into nearly every scene, not with sermons or speeches, but with silence, with shadows, with symbols that speak directly to the viewer's subconscious. And just when you think you've seen it all, a mouse runs across the floor, small, fragile, almost forgettable. And yet, that little creature might be the most important character in the entire film. 5. Mr. Jingles was more than a pet. At first glance, Mr. Jingles seems like comic relief, a quirky mouse performing circus tricks in a prison full of death. Something to make the audience smile between heavier scenes. But the Green Mile doesn't do meaningless details. And Mr. Jingles isn't just a pet, he's a test. From the moment he enters the story, the mouse becomes a moral measuring stick, revealing each character's soul without a single word. Watch closely. Every character's reaction to Mr. Jingles foreshadows the choices they'll later make about John Coffey. Delacroix, the inmate who bonds with him, shows tenderness despite his past. He builds a spool wheel, teaches the mouse tricks, calls him Mr. Jingles like he's royalty. For all of Del's flaws, he's still capable of love and gentleness. Then there's Percy. He tries to kill the mouse, not out of fear or duty, but because he can. He steps on it, laughs about it, and sees no value in something small and defenseless. That scene alone tells you everything you need to know about him. His cruelty isn't driven by anger, it's driven by power. And then there's Paul. At first, Paul ignores the mouse. He sees it as a distraction, a nuisance. But eventually, he chooses to protect it. And in that small choice, barely noticeable, he reveals something massive. His willingness to step in for the vulnerable, even when it's inconvenient. Even when no one's watching. Mr. Jingles isn't just there to entertain, he's a mirror. He reflects who people really are. And he's not just a setup, he's a symbol. The mouse lives, longer than any mouse should, decades in fact. When the film's epilogue reveals that Mr. Jingles is still alive, long after everyone else is gone, it's not just a quirky twist, it's a message. A spiritual echo. He was touched by John Coffey, blessed or cursed, depending on how you see it. Just like Paul, the two survivors, left to carry the burden of Coffey's power, to remember, to witness. And it's not a happy ending, it's a haunting one. Because the gift they were given, the life extended, it's not really a reward, it's a sentence. A reminder that grace, even when freely given, can still come with a price. That's what makes The Green Mile so unforgettable. It asks a brutal question in the gentlest possible way. Do the weak deserve protection, even if it costs you something? Every character answers it, first with a mouse, then with a man. And for the cast, bringing that idea to life wasn't just emotional. For some, it was too much to bear. 6. The scene that shattered them. Everyone remembers the ending of The Green Mile. The final walk. The silent room. The soft-spoken giant about to die. But there's one moment buried within that scene that hit harder than anything else. Not just for the audience, but for the cast. John Coffey's last request wasn't for mercy, or justice, or even to be saved. It was this: "Please, boss, don't put me in the dark. I's afraid of the dark." 7 words. That's all it took, and everything changed. That line came straight from Stephen King's original novel, but on screen it landed like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a magical healer or a Christ-like symbol anymore. This was a man. A terrified, vulnerable man who could cure tumors but couldn't face the dark alone. Michael Clarke Duncan's performance in that moment wasn't just powerful. It was devastating. He didn't cry in a big, showy way. He didn't shout or scream. He pleaded. And when he did, it crushed everyone on set. The guard's final gesture, not placing the execution hood over Coffey's face, wasn't scripted as heroism. It was mercy. Quiet, unspoken mercy for a man who had lived his life misunderstood, feared, and alone. And now, even in his last moment, just wanted to see the light. The scene was so emotionally intense, it affected the cast long after the cameras stopped rolling. Some crew members reportedly left the set. Others stayed behind in silence. And even Hanks, a veteran actor who had handled scenes of war, grief, and loss, later admitted that filming Coffey's execution was one of the hardest days of his career. Because it didn't feel like acting. It felt real. Duncan, by all accounts, wasn't just portraying fear. He was channeling something personal. The weight of being seen a certain way your whole life. Strong, invincible, larger than life. And then showing the truth, that even giants are afraid of the dark. For audiences, that moment was the emotional climax. For the cast, it was something else entirely. A reminder of what the film was actually about. Not just death, not just justice, but the need to be seen, to be comforted, to be understood, even in your final hour. And what most people don't know is that the studio almost ended the film right there. No epilogue, no old Paul, no haunting final shot. But Frank Darabont had one more story to tell. One that revealed the true cost of compassion. 7. The ending that almost got cut. Imagine The Green Mile ending with John Coffey's execution. The lights dim, the screen fades to black, credits roll. That was the plan. Studio executives believed the film was already too long. They argued that everything after Coffey's death, the older Paul Edgecombe, the nursing home, the immortal mouse, was unnecessary. It slowed the pacing, they said. It dulled the emotional impact. But Frank Darabont disagreed, fiercely. He knew that The Green Mile wasn't just about death. It was about what comes after. The grief, the weight of choice, the quiet agony of living with something you can never undo. That's why the epilogue matters. It shows us Paul, now an old man, watching everyone he's ever loved die while he remains untouched by time. Still haunted, still carrying Coffey's memory like a scar that never fades. It's not a happy ending. It's not closure. It's consequence. And here's the twist. Those nursing home scenes weren't filmed last. They were filmed first. Darabont shot them before the rest of the movie so that every actor, especially Hanks, could carry that emotional burden with them through the rest of the production. The regret, the sorrow, the memory of what had already happened, even though the rest of the story was still being filmed. It gave the entire film a deeper layer. Every look Hanks gives, every pause, every soft moment between his character and Coffey, they aren't just about what's happening in the present. They're about what's coming. Without that final chapter, the film loses something essential. It becomes just another story about a magical prisoner with healing powers, a fantasy, a fable. But with the ending intact, The Green Mile becomes something else, a meditation on guilt, on justice, on how even doing the right thing can feel unbearable when it costs you your soul. The studio pushed hard to cut it, and Darabont pushed harder to keep it. Thankfully, he won. Because without that final image of Paul feeding Mr. Jingles in a dim room, without that line, "We each owe a death, there are no exceptions, but sometimes, oh God, The Green Mile seems so long," the story would have ended with death. But The Green Mile isn't about death. It's about what you do with the life you have left. And the man who made that message possible almost didn't audition at all. 8. Michael Clarke Duncan's transformation. Before The Green Mile, Michael Clarke Duncan was nobody. At least in Hollywood terms. He was 6'5", nearly 300 pounds, and built like a man you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. His resume? Security guard, celebrity bodyguard, manual laborer. His acting roles, when they came, were forgettable. Nameless bouncers, background muscle, the kind of characters who grunted more than they spoke. So when casting for John Coffey began, Duncan didn't even consider himself a contender. The character wasn't just physically imposing. He needed to radiate empathy, carry a childlike innocence, and convey a level of sorrow that would break your heart with a glance. Duncan told his manager not to bother. He didn't think he was actor enough, but he was wrong. During the audition, Duncan stumbled over his lines. Nervous, overwhelmed. But when he got to the now iconic monologue, "I'm tired of people being ugly to each other," the room went silent. No one breathed. Director Frank Darabont later said that in that moment, he knew they had found John Coffey. Still, Duncan struggled with confidence. This wasn't just another movie. This was his first major role. His first time carrying the emotional weight of a film. And he wasn't sure he could do it. That's when Tom Hanks stepped in. Between takes, Hanks coached Duncan, encouraged him, reassured him. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't required. It was one actor helping another become something more than he believed he could be. Duncan rose to the challenge. He worked with famed acting coach Larry Moss, studied sick children and hospital patients to understand vulnerability, and adjusted his entire physicality for the role. Coffey wasn't a man who stormed into a room. He shuffled in, gently, cautiously, always aware of his own size, his own presence. In scenes of healing, Duncan would stiffen slightly, centering himself, almost as if channeling something from beyond. Audiences didn't just see the transformation on screen. They felt it. Critics who had never heard his name suddenly couldn't stop talking about him. Duncan was nominated for an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, an almost unheard-of achievement for someone with no prior leading roles. He didn't win the Oscar, but he won something more lasting: respect and a place in cinema history. After The Green Mile, Duncan never played nameless roles again. He starred in The Whole Nine Yards, Planet of the Apes, The Scorpion King, Daredevil, and many more. But no role ever eclipsed Coffey, because Coffey wasn't just a character. He was a breakthrough, a turning point, a moment when the world saw a man, once dismissed as just muscle, reveal the soul of a gentle giant. And when people talk about The Green Mile nearly 25 years later, they don't just remember the story, or the symbolism, or the heartbreak. They remember him. The long walk never ends. The Green Mile isn't just a film, it's an experience. One that doesn't end when the credits roll. It lingers. In the silence of Coffey's last breath, in the quiet footsteps down that long, green corridor, in the faces of men who thought they were just doing their jobs, until they realized they were taking part in something far more complicated, far more human than they ever imagined. It's a story about mercy in a place built for death, about conscience in a world built to crush it, and about how one man, misunderstood, feared, and ultimately sacrificed, became a mirror for everyone around him. But maybe the real miracle wasn't the healing. Maybe it was what Coffey left behind, the change in others, the moral awakening, the silent burden Paul Edgecombe carried for decades, the mouse who lived far too long, and the audience who walked away feeling just a little different, even if they couldn't explain why. Because The Green Mile isn't just about death row. It's about the choices we live with, the lives we touch, and the quiet power of compassion in a world that rarely rewards it. So if you've seen The Green Mile before, maybe now, it's time to watch it again, with new eyes. And if you haven't, don't wait, because once you truly see what this film was trying to say, you'll never forget it. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and step into the next story. There's always more behind the curtain.